Once upon a time, nestled in a valley where the stream sang a soft, steady song, lay the village of Ticking-by-the-Brook. This town was famous for one thing: clocks. Big clocks, small clocks, loud clocks, silent clocks. Clocks of every kind filled the windows and echoed from the town square. In a small workshop, covered in the comforting smell of old wood and brass polish, lived a young apprentice named Pip. Pip wasn't strong or loud. He looked handsome for his age, with hands that were quick and gentle, and he had a rare gift. He could listen to clocks. While other clockmakers hammered and oiled and rushed, Pip would hold a broken clock like a sleeping kitten, putting his ear right next to the wood. He would wait until he heard the clock's tiny sad sigh, the sigh of a tiny stuck gear or a piece of dust blocking the way. Pip didn't have the fanciest tools. His favorite was a tiny smooth piece of green jade, which he used to nudge the smallest gears, and a very soft feather for dusting. One day, a great and terrible noise clattered into Ticking-by-the-Brook. It wasn't the sound of music or laughter. It was the sound of bragging. "Make way for the great master!" boomed a voice like a rusted bell. It was Baron Von Clink. He was the richest clockmaker in all the lands, and he brought with him a clock that was truly awful. It was enormous and covered in gold leaf
Make way for
and
the
shiny
great
cheap
master!
diamonds. It didn't keep time well, but it made a terrible noise. When it chimed, it didn't sing. It clanked and crashed, shaking the fillings right out of your teeth. Baron Von Clink saw Pip working quietly on a tiny pocket watch. He laughed, a great, booming, empty sound. "Look at this little worm!" Baron Clink shouted, pointing a fat finger at Pip's simple tools. Where are your expensive electric polishers?
Where expensive electric
Where
polishers?
is your solid gold
Where
hammer?
is your solid...
You use a feather and a piece of rock. How can you make anything worthwhile with nothing? Pip just smiled softly and held up the repaired pocket watch. It wasn't flashy, but its tiny tick-tick-tick was perfectly steady. "I only use what the clock needs, sir," Pip said quietly. "Sometimes the quietest tools are the best listeners." Baron Von Clink just scoffed and marched into the town square, where the mayor was making a huge announcement. The challenge of King Chronos. The mayor, a nervous man named Mr. Tick-Tock, stood beneath the most famous and most mysterious monument in the village, the King Chronos Clock. The King Chronos Clock was enormous. It was made of deep, dark oak and brass that had turned green with age. It hadn't chimed in over 100 years. Legend said it held the perfect time, but only for those who truly understood the heart of time, not just the numbers.
Citizens, the annual Golden Gear competition is here. This year, the challenge is simple. Fix the King Chronos Clock.
The next day, the competition began. Baron Von Clink went first. He dragged out gigantic machinery and flashing, noisy gadgets. He used huge wrenches and hammered loudly on the clock's heavy frame. Clang, bang, rattle. "Work, you old fool!" He poured gallons of the thickest, most expensive oil onto the works. The clock only rattled and coughed. The oil didn't help. It just gummed up the ancient, delicate mechanisms. After 2 hours of noise and shouting, Baron Von Clink was red in the face. He had failed. Next came the other master clockmakers. They all tried their own methods, but they all had one thing in common. They used force. They tried to replace parts with shiny new ones, but the old wood rejected the new metal. Every person failed because they treated the clock like a thing to be controlled, not a friend to be heard. By the end of the day, everyone was tired and disappointed. The King Chronos Clock remained silent. Finally, it was Pip's turn. He walked to the giant, silent clock. He didn't carry a toolbox. He carried his tiny piece of smooth jade and the soft feather.
What is he doing? Going to tickle it back to life? This is a joke.
Baron Von Clink burst into laughter. "What is he doing? Going to tickle it back to life? This is a joke." Pip didn't look at the Baron. He looked only at the King Chronos Clock. He placed his small hand on the cold, dark wood of the clock's case. It felt quiet, peaceful, but deep inside he could feel a sadness. Then Pip remembered what he loved most about his own work: the silence. He shooed away a buzzing fly and gently dusted a spider web from the bottom corner of the clock with his feather.
I know you're
not broken, old friend, Pip
You're
whispered
just
to the
waiting
wood.
for someone to
You're
listen.
just waiting for someone to listen. He finally opened the main panel. Inside, the gears were breathtaking. Not rusted, but dry. Not broken, but dusty. And right at the center, a tiny, ancient brass gear was stuck by the finest piece of forgotten sawdust. No big tool could have seen it or reached it. Pip took a deep breath. He held his little jade piece, not as a tool, but as an extension of his own gentle finger. He slowly, carefully, pushed the piece of salt. For a minute, nothing happened. The entire town held its breath. Baron Von Clink opened his mouth to mock Pip again, but before he could,
Look,
a
it's
sound
moving.
filled the air. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was the softest, most beautiful sound anyone had ever heard. Tick. It was perfectly steady, perfectly true, and deeply peaceful. Then, the minute hand moved, and the hour hand followed. Then, the King Chronos Clock chimed. It wasn't a clank or a crash. It was a deep, resonant, beautiful note, like the sound of clean crystal being tapped by moonlight. It rang out, not with force, but with authority and pure, perfect time. The chime was so calming, so peaceful, that the wild hands on Baron Von Clink's flashy clock stopped spinning completely. Pip looked up, his eyes shining. It only needed patience, he whispered, and to be heard, not shouted at.
Pip, you did not use the fanciest tools, but you had the wisest heart. You taught us all a lesson.
Mr. Tick-Tock, the mayor, stepped forward, tears in his eyes. He presented Pip with the golden gear, which glowed softly, not brightly. Pip, the mayor announced, you did not use the fanciest tools, but you had the wisest heart. You taught us all a lesson. Pip became the chief clockmaker of Ticking-by-the-Brook. He kept his soft feather and his tiny piece of jade. He never got a huge, expensive workshop. He never got a booming, gold-covered clock. Instead, his quiet workshop became a sanctuary, and the sound of his little pocket watches, tick, 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 reminded everyone of the wonderful moral he had shown them. The King Chronos Clock continued to chime every hour, and every time it did, the people remembered. True worth is not about having the best of everything. It's about being patient, being kind, and truly listening to the quiet needs of the world around you.